On my 18th birthday, my parents gave me a laptop. That alone shocked me because they'd never spent much money on me before. At first, I thought maybe they were finally trying to do something nice. But when I powered it on, something popped up on the screen that made my blood run cold. I didn't break down. I didn't cry. Instead, I made a choice. And the very next day, the police were at our door. Stick with me while I tell you exactly what happened. My name is Alara Jennings. I've lived my whole life in a quiet suburb in the Midwest. We're not a rich family, not even close. Most birthdays I'd get a small gift. Maybe a book, maybe some clothes. Nothing fancy, nothing over $100, ever. So when my parents handed me a brand new laptop wrapped in shiny blue paper, I stared at it like it wasn't real. First, I thought maybe things had changed. Maybe they wanted to celebrate me becoming an adult. I was smiling when I powered it on. But then the smile froze. The desktop wasn't empty. A folder was already there. It had my name on it. I clicked, expecting maybe they'd left me a note or a picture. Instead, I found dozens of video files. My stomach twisted. I clicked one. It was my own bedroom. My face lit by the dim glow of my lamp as I changed clothes. Another file showed me in the bathroom, brushing my hair, undressing, completely unaware. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the laptop. This wasn't some prank. This wasn't funny. Someone had been recording me. My chest went tight like I couldn't breathe. I slammed the laptop shut and stumbled into the living room, heart pounding. "Where did you get this?" I demanded, shoving the laptop at my dad. My voice cracked, but I held my ground. He looked at me for a second, then shrugged like it was nothing. My mom glanced up from her coffee, her face flat. "It's a laptop," she said. "What's the problem?" My skin crawled. Their calmness felt wrong. Too wrong. They weren't shocked, they weren't confused. They knew. I could see it in their eyes. And in that moment something in me shifted. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to let them gaslight me. I was going to act. That night I stayed awake with the laptop open, watching every single file. And as I watched, I started planning. I sat on the edge of my bed, the laptop balanced on my knees, its pale glow lighting up my room. My hand shook as I scrolled through the files, and then I saw a folder with my own name on it. I hesitated, my stomach twisting, but I clicked. My breath caught. The folder was packed with videos. Dozens, maybe hundreds. I scrolled further and the dates stretched back years. Years. My heart sank. This wasn't new. Someone had been watching me for a very long time. I clicked on one at random. It was me, maybe 14, asleep in bed, the camera catching every tiny movement. Another showed me sitting at my desk, chewing on a pencil while I worked on homework, unaware of anything around me. Watching those clips made my skin crawl. I felt cold all over, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Then I noticed the timestamps. Some were recent, just days ago. Others were old, reaching back to times I could barely remember. That's when it hit me. The laptop wasn't a gift. It was a tool. A way to keep tabs on me even once I left home. I stormed into the living room, clutching the laptop to my chest like evidence. "What is this?" I demanded. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. My mom barely looked up from her coffee. "You're overreacting," she said flatly, like she was bored. My dad leaned back in his chair, his tone clipped. "It's just some glitch. Don't make a scene." Their calmness made my blood boil. They wanted me to think I was crazy. But I knew what I had seen. I bit my tongue and walked back to my room, my chest burning. I opened the mail app and dug through the drafts, desperate for proof. That's when I found it. A message sitting unsent, my dad's account at the top. My eyes froze on the words, "Selling sets. More soon." My throat closed up. It wasn't just spying. He was sharing it. Selling it. My own father. The betrayal settled into me like fire. This wasn't just invasion. It was business. And I wasn't about to let him get away with it. I slid a blank USB drive into the laptop, my hands clammy as I copied everything. Each progress bar felt like it moved too slowly, and every creak of the house made me jump. I couldn't let them know I had this. If they caught me, I didn't know what they'd do. When the last file finally transferred, I yanked the drive out and shoved it deep into my pocket like it was my lifeline. I wasn't done. I opened the email account again, scrolling through the drafts and sent messages, tracing every address. That's when I found one name that kept popping up. Curtis Hale. At first, it meant nothing, just another contact. But then I dug deeper. Curtis wasn't just anyone. He was someone my dad used to talk about, an old friend he'd Done business with years back. The pieces began to slide into place and my stomach turned. Payment records, attachments, messages half deleted. It was all there if I looked hard enough. Curtis had been sending money. My dad had been sending something in return. I didn't need to guess what it was. The evidence sat in my hands, clear and ugly. I wasn't just being watched. I was being sold. The realization nearly made me drop the USB. My own father had been turning me into a paycheck, and suddenly all the small things, the random times he'd been overprotective, the way he kept me from locking my door, made cruel sense. He hadn't been protecting me. He'd been profiting from me. I glanced at my mom later that night as she washed dishes at the sink. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word, but something in the way she moved, too calm, too steady, told me she knew. She had chosen silence. That betrayal stung just as much as my father's. So I played along. I smiled at dinner, I said goodnight like nothing was wrong. On the outside I was the same daughter I'd always been. But inside I was already building a plan. Every word they spoke, every move they made, I was storing it all away. They thought I was still their clueless little girl. They had no idea I was already turning into their worst enemy. I locked my bedroom door and slid down against it, clutching the USB in my hand. The walls of my room felt like they were closing in on me. Every corner looked tainted, every shadow like another hidden lens. I had lived here all my life, but now it didn't feel like home. It felt like a cage. For the first time I realized I wasn't even safe in my own skin. My chest tightened until I couldn't hold it anymore. I buried my face in my knees and let the sobs shake out of me. When my hands stopped trembling enough to hold the phone, I called the only person I trusted, Maren Douglas. The second she picked up, I broke. Words tumbled out between gasps. The files, the emails, the money. Silence followed on the other end, then Maren's voice, low and fierce. Alaire, you can't stay there. You have to go to the police. I pressed the heel of my palm to my forehead. Not yet. They'll deny everything. I need proof they can't talk their way out of. My voice cracked, but my mind was sharpening even through the fear. After I hung up, I opened another video file almost without thinking. The screen lit up with an image that gutted me. It was me years ago, curled up in the same room, crying. I couldn't even remember what had made me so upset that night. But the fact that someone had captured it, saved it, replayed it, it tore at me in a way nothing else had. My grief wasn't private. My pain had been turned into someone else's entertainment. My tears dried as quickly as they came. The sadness curdled into something hotter, stronger. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. If I just handed this over quietly, maybe my father would get a slap on the wrist. Maybe my mother would keep her head down and walk away untouched. But that wasn't enough. I wanted the truth out. I wanted them ruined. If they had turned me into a commodity, then I would turn their secrets into their destruction. The rage steadied me like steel setting in my spine. I wiped my face, closed the laptop, and whispered into the silence of my room. They're not going to win. Not this time. I left my lamp on at night, books scattered across my desk, the laptop open like I was cramming for a test. Anyone walking past my door would think I was just another sleepless teenager. But behind the screen, my eyes burned as I combed through hidden corners of the drive. The hours blurred together, but I couldn't stop. That's when I found them, folders that didn't belong to me. Names I didn't recognize, faces of girls who had no idea they were being watched. The realization hit like a punch. This wasn't just about me. It was bigger, uglier, organized. My father and Curtis weren't slipping. They were running something. An operation. My stomach twisted as I clicked out of the files, bile rising in my throat. I needed more than suspicion. I needed them to incriminate themselves. That's when the idea came to me, bait. I adjusted my webcam, angled the microphone, and staged a fake video call. I made sure my voice carried, casual and clear. Yeah, I'll be gone all weekend. I'll be back Sunday night. I repeated it twice like I wanted whoever was listening to be sure. Then I closed the call window, left the laptop running, and forced myself to act normal. Hours later, I went back into the drafts and inbox, fingers cold on the keys. I scrolled and scrolled until one line froze me. An email waiting to be sent. The words blurred for a second before they sharpened. She's gone this weekend. I'll send you fresh content once she's back. The air left my lungs. My father hadn't hesitated. The moment he thought I was away, he'd promised more. Not privacy, not safety, content. That's what I was to him. That's what he had turned me into. My pulse hammered in my ears. I stared at the sentence until my eyes stung, memorizing every word. I had the proof now, undeniable and damning. The walls of the house felt thinner than ever, like they could hear my thoughts, but inside me the fire only grew hotter. They thought they were careful. They thought I was blind. But I was watching them just as closely now. And I was no longer afraid. I spent the next morning feeding sheets of paper through the printer, the hum of the machine covering the pounding of my heart. Each page that slid out held another piece of truth. Dates, video logs, messages, money transfers. I stacked them carefully in order, labeling them so no one could claim I was mistaken. When the last sheet landed, I placed it all in a folder and held it like it was a weapon. That night, I asked Marin to meet me behind the library. I laid everything out for her. Every file, every printout, every disgusting detail. She didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled her backpack off her shoulder and held it open. "Give me copies," she said. "If anything happens, this won't disappear." I handed over a second USB and another folder of papers, relief flooding me. Knowing the evidence wasn't trapped in that house with me made it easier to breathe. Later, I walked into the kitchen and found my mom at the counter, drying dishes. She looked up and gave me a small smile, the kind mothers give when they want to seem warm. But all I could see was the emptiness behind her eyes. He knew. He had to. And instead of standing between me and my father, she'd chosen to stand beside him. That realization cut deeper than anything else. I wanted to scream, to shake her, but I stayed silent. That night, I hid my phone near the vent outside their bedroom door and pressed record. Their voices bled through the wall, low but sharp. My father spoke first, muttering about keeping everything running. My mother's answer made my stomach drop. "You've gone too far with this, but I won't lose everything we built." I stopped breathing. She wasn't a bystander. She wasn't ignorant. He was in it with him. I listened to the recording again and again, her words searing into me. There was no saving her. There was no innocence left to cling to. The betrayal was complete. By the time I pulled the phone back into my hands, my resolve was set. My parents weren't partners to me anymore. They were accomplices to each other. And I was done protecting their secrets. I hid tiny recorders in places I knew my parents never bothered to check. The bookshelf in the hallway, the space above the fridge, even under the couch cushions. Each one was tucked away with care, their little red lights blinking like silent allies. At dinner, I forced a smile and thanked them again for the laptop, my voice syrupy sweet. My father's chest puffed up like he'd done something noble, and my mother nodded without meeting my eyes. Inside bow rose, but I pushed it down. They had to believe I was still blind. A few nights later, I sat in my room with the door cracked open. Through the faint hum of the house, I heard the clatter of keys as my dad carried the laptop into his study. I peeked from the shadows, watching him plug in a flash drive and begin typing commands. My hidden recorder caught everything. The keystrokes, the murmured curses, the confirmation screens flashing by. He was updating the spyware, layering new traps for me to stumble into. He thought he was outsmarting me, but all he was doing was digging his own grave. I didn't stop there. Another night, I trailed my mother with my phone recording quietly in my pocket. She sat at the kitchen counter, bank statements spread across the screen. Her hands moved quickly, erasing lines, adjusting balances, shifting money out of view. She wasn't just ignoring what he was doing, she was cleaning up after him, protecting the cash flow that came from my humiliation. I saved every second, every keystroke, every click of a mouse. The evidence piled up in neat little files, and with each one I felt a new layer of disgust settle over me. They weren't just watching me. They weren't just selling me. They were choosing profit over blood, greed over family. When I looked at them across the dinner table after that, I no longer saw parents. I saw two people working a scheme, united not by love but by money and corruption. And the more I played the role of the oblivious daughter, the more I knew. When the trap snapped shut, they wouldn't see it coming. I waited until the house was quiet, then asked Marin to come over. She sat beside me on the couch, her hand steady on my arm while my parents stared from across the room. My heart pounded, but my voice didn't shake. "I know what you've been doing." My dad scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Ungrateful. That's what you are. After everything we've given you, this is how you talk to us." My mom's face twisted, her tone sharp. "You're tearing this family apart, Alara. Do you even hear yourself?" I didn't argue. Instead, I pulled out my phone, tapped a file and let the sound play. Their own voices spilled into the room. My father's muttering, my mother's cold reply, admitting what they'd built. The air went still. My dad's smirk faltered, my mom's hands gripped the edge of her seat. "You don't get to deny it anymore," I said quietly. "And just so you know, every single piece of this has been copied and given to someone I trust. Even if you take this away from me, it won't matter. It's already out of your hands." For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Then my father shot up, his face red, eyes blazing. He lunged across the room, his hands reaching for me like claws. Before he could touch me, Marin jumped to her feet and shouted into her phone, her voice trembling but strong, "911 now." The sound of her words cut through the chaos, freezing the moment in place. My father's fury, my mother's pale face, the weight of years of secrets, it all collided in that single breath. And I didn't flinch. The next morning, the sound of pounding fists rattled the front door. My mother froze halfway down the stairs, my father stiffened in the hallway. When the door swung open, uniforms filled the entryway, voices firm and commanding. Papers were flashed, orders barked. The house that had always felt suffocating suddenly belonged to someone else. I stepped forward, folder in hand, and passed it to the officer leading the charge. "Everything's here," I said, my voice steady. USB drives, printed pages, recordings. It all changed hands in a blur of gloves and evidence bags. They nodded, already moving through the house, pulling wires, seizing devices. Through the open window, I could hear more sirens in the distance. Curtis was being taken down at the same time, I was told. The trail of emails had led them straight to his door. The thought of him being dragged out in cuffs almost made me smile. When they finally turned back to my parents, the room seemed to shrink. My father's wrists were forced behind his back, the snap of metal echoing like a final verdict. My mother didn't fight, but tears streamed down her cheeks as the cuffs closed around her too. She wouldn't meet my eyes. My father did. His glare burned with hatred so sharp it almost made me shiver, but I held his gaze until they pulled him away. Outside, the street had filled with neighbors, whispering, pointing, eyes wide with disbelief. To them we had always looked polished, untouchable, normal. Watching their shock as my parents were led past them in chains felt like the mask finally ripping apart. I stood in the doorway, the morning air cool against my skin, watching the squad cars roll away. My chest ached, but it wasn't the same suffocating weight anymore. It was release. For the first time, their secrets weren't mine to carry. Marin's parents cleared out their guest room for me, folding fresh sheets and setting a plate at the table like I belonged there all along. The house felt different. Warm, safe, full of voices that didn't carry hidden threats. For the first time in weeks, I slept without waking to check the corners of the room. Detectives called me in for updates, assuring me I wouldn't have to face my parents unprotected. They spoke of hearings, evidence, testimony, but they always finished the same way: "You're safe now." I clung to those words even when the weight of everything threatened to crush me. News traveled fast through the neighborhood. People who once waved politely from their lawns now crossed the street to hug me, whispering that they had no idea what was happening behind our walls. Their pity stung, but their support gave me strength. The facade my parents had built was gone, and with it, their power over me. I thought I would feel broken, but instead there was a strange clarity. They had tried to reduce me to something to be watched, traded, used. Yet it was their own arrogance, their own tools that I had turned against them. Every file, every recording, every careless word, they had built the case that destroyed them. As I stood on Marin's porch one evening, watching the sunset spill across the quiet street, I whispered the truth I had carried since that first night with the laptop. I didn't cry. I took action. And because of that, they'll never hurt me or anyone else again.